Trump economic advisor Stephen Moore says the time to start reopening the United States for business is now. He recently stirred a lot of controversy when he compared social distancing protesters to civil rights activist Rosa Parks. We'll find out what he meant by that as he joins me for an in-depth one-on-one. In addition to advising the president, Mr. Moore is a member of the White House panel on reopening America. Stephen, thanks for joining us. The Senate has approved a $480 billion relief package for small businesses. What's your reaction? Good idea?
I'm not the biggest fan of that, by the way, Larry. So good to see you again. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
I think there are real problems with that loan program. It's become a bit of a sieve where it keeps spending more and more and more money. And I have a problem that a lot of the small businesses, Larry, that need the money the most aren't necessarily getting the money. We made a big mistake in turning that loan program, which is something that I supported, Art Laffer supported, Steve Forbes supported, the idea of during a time of crisis, you want to give healthy businesses that were healthy, that don't have customers, a bridge loan so they can get through this, so that when we're up and running, hopefully very soon, that they can be up and running and hiring workers. What we did was we transformed that into a grant program so that if you didn't lay off your workers, the loan became a grant. And so what has happened, Larry, and this is a story that's not been widely told, is that the healthy businesses, the ones that weren't going to lay off their workers anyways, they said, I can get a $2 or $3 or $4 million grant from the government, and they've lined up for this money. And the companies that we really wanted to get the grants aren't getting it. And unfortunately, we haven't fixed that problem yet.
Why would people who want to have more? Why would you apply for a loan if you don't need it?
Because it becomes a grant. So in other words, you sign up for a $2 million. Let's say you have 20 workers. You sign up for a $2 million grant. And if you don't lay off your workers for a certain number of months, I don't know the exact particulars, then that loan converts into what they call a forgivable loan or a grant of money. You don't have to pay it back. That's why these businesses are signing up for it. And it was a dumb idea at the time. They still haven't fixed that. But ultimately, I'm of the mindset, Larry, that it doesn't matter how many of these $1 trillion bills they spend. They're on phase 3, phase 4. I think the last one is phase 3.5. And we now have the Fed printing trillions of dollars of money. If you don't have your businesses up and running, if you don't have workers working and producing things, in the end of the day, it's not going to matter how many of these bailout bills we pass, because you have to have a productive economy for things to work.
Makes sense. Mitch McConnell is now saying he won't consider another phase of stimulation until the Senate's back. He also declared it's time to start thinking about the amount of debt the country is piling up. Do you share that view?
I think that it doesn't make any sense to do more of these spending programs. There is going to be a battle royale in Washington, Larry, over what is being called the blue state bailout. So I think you're there in California. California and New York and Connecticut and New Jersey and my home state of Illinois have big, massive budget problems because their revenues have fallen so much because people aren't working, so they're not paying income taxes. And then you have a problem where you're spending more money on all of the issues related to coronavirus. But these blue states are in big trouble. And there is a real Nancy Pelosi from California, obviously, and the Senate minority leader wants to have New York bailed out. And I'll tell you this, the Republicans aren't much in the mood for a bailout of the blue states. So that will be a big battle in the next round.
You recently said you thought the economy has turned a corner. What corner?
Well, I don't know exactly if I said that. I think what I said was when I met with the president last week during our economic recovery task force meeting, I said, if we can get the economy up and running in a week or two, and I am a big advocate of that, and obviously doing it in the safest way possible and using the best types of medical know-how and the best kind of public health safeguards. But if we can get people back on the at least on a rolling basis, getting the economy up and running, I do think by the end of the summer, we could have a bit of a plateau and a recovery. The summer is going to be a disaster. I mean, I hate to tell people this, but we're going to see 20% unemployment rate in this country, and it's going to last several months. And that's not something I ever thought I would see in my lifetime. So it's going to take a while for these businesses to get up and running again. And some of them, by the way, are never coming back. That's one of the reasons I've been such a strong advocate for getting the economy open, because every day you keep it closed, more and more of these great businessmen and women who voted their whole life, they're not coming back. So I do think by the end of the summer, we could start to see some improvement, and that is much needed.
More with Stephen Moore right after this. Are you putting the economy ahead of health?
I refuse to let some of the people who disagree with me take the moral high ground on this. The way you said it is exactly the way that a lot of people who favor this shutdown are saying that, we have to bear any burden, and that anyone like me who favors getting the economy up and running is trying to kill people and is putting greed and profits over people's lives. And I think that is a very unfair kind of Sophie's choice, that either we have to have 30 million people unemployed or we have to have, tens of thousands of more people die. What I'm trying to say, Larry, is we can do both. I mean, we can solve both of those problems. We can, in a very smart way, start the economy up and running, and we can continue to save lives. What I'm here to tell you, Larry, is if we keep this American economy shut down for another month or two, the devastation to the American society, the health problems, the human misery that you're causing, by the way, not just in the United States, but around the world. As you know, the United States is really the epicenter of the global economy. You're talking about suicide, depression, child abuse. You're talking about things like you're seeing big increases in alcoholism. You're seeing big increases in things like drug overdoses. We know that when people become unemployed and their lives are ruined, their businesses are ruined, that has extreme negative health consequences. There's a rule of thumb that for every 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate, that's associated with about 10,000 additional deaths per year. So if we take the unemployment rate from 3.5% to 20%, you've just killed 175,000 people from economic deprivation. And one last thing, you can tell I feel strongly about this. Larry, the people who are being hurt the most by this shutdown are not people like you and me, and it's not people in the media, and it's not people in government positions or university professors. The people who are getting creamed here are the lowest income people, the people who live paycheck to paycheck, who have lost their jobs. They don't have any savings. You've seen the pictures, Larry, of the food trucks, the Salvation Army food trucks in major cities. They're a mile long now, and they're getting longer every day. So I think we're doing more damage, not just to our economy, but to the health of our nation by keeping this economy shut down much longer.
So, Stephen, let's get maybe a better explanation, or have you been misquoted? Or did you draw a parallel between protesters and Rosa Parks?
So what I said was, I was talking to a group of activists, and I was trying to motivate them. Look, let me start by saying this. I wrote my senior thesis in college on the American tradition, which I'm very much a civil libertarian, and this great American tradition of civil disobedience. It goes back to Henry David Thoreau and Emerson. And then you've had people, great heroes of America over time, that have practiced civil disobedience. And I was mentioned, one of my favorites who I wrote my thesis on was Rosa Parks. She is a great, great, great hero of mine. And I was saying, try to be like Rosa Parks. If you see injustice in what's happening, Rosa Parks should be your role model. So people, I think, misinterpret that to say I was somehow saying that these protesters are on par with what Rosa Parks did. I certainly didn't mean that. It was almost like, when you're on a football team and you quote, General George Patton, let's go out there and win. I was trying to make, put her up as a kind of inspiration, because these people who are protesting, they have real beefs, Larry. I mean, they have real gripes. These are people who have lost their jobs. These are people who've lost their businesses. These are people who are facing real hardship, and these are people who feel their religious freedoms have been taken away with respect to church services being shut down. Now, people can disagree about whether they agree with these. We can have disagreement about whether they agree with what they're saying, but the idea that they should not be able to protest. And a lot of people should say, shut these down. That is contrary to the American idea of bringing grievances out in public and peacefully assembling.
By the way, I think Rosa Parks should be on the $20 bill.
That's a great idea. And you know what? Her lawyer, who represented her, is, I believe, 91 years old. I think his last name is Gray. But I've recommended to the President Trump, that he should win the Presidential Medal of Freedom, because that was Rosa Parks almost single-handedly helped bring the evils of desegregation to an end.
You maintain that social distancing, standing up to government, is similar to what Rosa Parks did. Do you equate government actions? You don't equate this to racism, do you?
No. What I'm saying is that she should be an inspiration to people who have grievances against injustice. Now, I do believe that some of the things that are happening in these states are very unjust. I think the idea that you're shutting down a small business that is deemed unessential, but the big box stores like Walmart and Best Buy stay open, I don't think that's fair, frankly, and I don't think it's fair to the small businessmen and women of this country. I don't think it's fair, and I don't think it's constitutional when people go to an Easter church service and they social distance from each other and the government shuts them down. I don't think it's fair when you have the government setting curfews, and I don't think it's in the American tradition. Some of the mayors are telling their neighbors to snitch on their neighbors if they are violating some of these government edicts. That's not America to me, and I think people should really resist this kind of heavy-handed treatment of some of our government officials.
Well stated. We'll be right back with more of Stephen Moore right after this. We're back with Stephen Moore. Stephen, a poll by the Pew Research Center showed about 2/3 of Americans are worried that the governments are going to lift restrictions too early. To be honest with you, if they lifted restrictions in California, I don't think I would go out.
So that's a great point. If you lift some of these restrictions, it doesn't require people to go back to work. It doesn't require a business to open. It allows them to open. It allows people to go out if they want to. And I think that's the right approach. I think you do it on a rolling basis. I think you got to be really smart here, Larry. The last thing we want, and as I've said, I'm a big advocate of getting things up and running again. But we don't want to see a recurrence of this evil disease. Some people think there might be a second or third wave of this. And so you have to use the social distancing. You have to have gloves. You have to have we need to use testing. We need treatments. We need screening. All of these things. I went to the White House a couple of weeks ago. Before you can get in, they take your temperature to make sure you don't have a fever. We have to be smart about this, Larry. There's 40% of the counties in the United States, 40% of the counties that have had virtually no coronavirus outbreaks and virtually no deaths. If you look at a map, Larry, and I would urge your viewers to do that. You can see it on the internet, where the coronavirus has hit. As most people know, 40 to 50% of the deaths are in New York City and the surrounding area. You have about 12 urban areas that have been really negatively affected, including my hometown of Chicago. Those areas need to continue to be shut down. We're making progress in those cities. New Orleans is making progress. New York is, but they still have a lot of cases. But if you're living in a county out in the middle of Nebraska or Oklahoma or Iowa or Wisconsin, why in the world should we keep those shut down? We've got to be really accurate about targeting where the virus has hit and where it hasn't.
Couple of other things, Stephen. What do you think of these briefings every day, and some networks not carrying it, claiming that they're more political than informative?
So I love this president. I work for him. I consider him dear friend, and he's been great to me. My advice to him is stick to the facts, stop fighting with the media. I think it would be to his political benefit to be more presidential and not get into the street brawls with these politicians. So I think he's doing himself some problem. He usually, when you have a crisis like this, people rally around the president. He continues to kind of antagonize some of the people that he should be bringing into his camp. And so if I were advising him, I would tell him to just tell the American people what's happening, be very straightforward, tell them what we have to do to beat this terrible, but he says that we're in a war against an invisible enemy, and I think that's right. So he should be more high-minded, I think. And if he did that, I think it would be to the benefit of him politically, but also to the country.
If this pandemic goes into the fall, will that be tough for his reelection?
Well, again, as someone who loves Donald Trump, I mean, I'm so frustrated, Larry, because 2 months ago we had the best economy we've had in 30 years, and I helped put the economic plan together with Larry Kudlow and some others. It was just working beautifully. We had the economy just booming. We had the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. We had 6 million surplus jobs. We had wages rising. We had growth back up, and so here we are 2 months later with the economy flat on its back. So much of the progress has been ruined by this virus. I believe that if the American people come to believe that Donald Trump has helped conquer this terrible virus and he has done everything he can to get the economy up and running again so people have jobs again, that he will win. But there's a lot of ifs there, and he's got a lot. I think the next 8 to 10 weeks for Donald Trump will be critical. They will define his presidency.
Stephen, it's always good talking to you. You're a great guest. We hope you come back soon.
Thank you. Stay safe, and great to see you again, my friend.